Previously, Victoria worked through design to lower hospital acquired infections, develop solutions and products that are efficient and effective. She's also worked with artisans throughout Latin America. She grew up in Guatemala and currently lives in Columbus, Ohio. Victoria, with that, I hand it over to you, and you have screen sharing rights.
Thank you so much. I'm actually 2 minutes away from being able to share my screen. I apologize. I'm so excited to meet all of you. I'll meet you in person in about 2 minutes. I had a little bit of an emergency, as everything is not what it seems in this new world that we're navigating. So I appreciate everyone's patience. I started this business out of the need to be able to give testing ability to everyone at a fair and equitable price. I realized that people were working within misinformation throughout, as you guys have all experienced, I'm sure, and that there was a lot of noise that we all needed to break through in order to figure out what the real implications of this pandemic are, and to make people feel safe within this space. So it started out with lowering hospital-acquired infections through mitigation of cross-contamination in clinical spaces, and it became my passion. And through that, I met a lot of people in the industry. And when I realized that people weren't getting tested because of lack of access to testing, one of my distributors came to me and said, "Hey, I've got some tests. Can you help me with this?" And it seemed easy enough. My parents were kind enough to raise me to think that I could do anything I set my mind to. Clearly, I listened and did not hesitate to move forward. I don't know that I trust them anymore, but in the process of that, I started looking into what was a good test and what wasn't a good test, and what FDA EUA meant and how important it was, and what tests were getting pulled and who as a distributor was on those lists. And I sought out to find people that had the same mentality that I did. I wanted everything to be compliant. I wanted it to be accessible, because not everyone can pay $500 to go get tested. And I wanted to make sure that everyone was informed when they headed out. So I had the tests. I was so excited. And I started saying, okay, well, let's sell these tests and let's get people tested. And then I realized that without a lab network, you would end up in a week or two waiting line for labs to turn over those tests. And then I realized that I had to bring those tests in from other countries, and looked at what that was all about. And then I realized I needed a doctor to prescribe and actually follow up with people who were sick. So I went out and partnered with a consortium of people who have pulled together 25 different factories in South Korea and can provide the PPE for me and the testing. And I partnered with a telemedicine doctor, an HR specialist, and then someone who could really tell me exactly what was going on legally with the CDC, with the FDA, and kind of threw all of it under this umbrella with the labs. And so now I can pitch a tent in the middle of a field, get over 100 or 200 or 300 people tested, and get those tests to the lab and produce the results in between 24 and 36 hours. So that is where I am. And so I'm going to share my screen now that I'm on dry land, so that you guys can see my website, and hopefully we can open it up for questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me get in here. I'm so sorry about my
No, that's
technical.
okay. I think that we're all learning in the time of the Zoom calls from COVID-19 is that we're all very forgiving about technology. Um, and so take your time. And in the meantime, I just want to say the work that you're doing is amazing. And I know you're also working with a lot of farmers and other underserved communities to make sure that people who can't afford the fancy tests get a test anyway. So,
and that is one of the things that's very important to me, is making sure that people who do not have access to testing. So one of the big issues right now that's just kind of hitting the news is the fact that migrant farmers are dying of COVID at an alarming rate. And I told this story yesterday. I was at a store and I overheard these ladies speaking to each other, and one of them said, I lost my uncle to COVID and I really loved him. And the other one said, nobody should be eating the meat because it's in the meat. And my mother was with me and she looked at me and she's like, do you want to go talk to them? And I'm like, no, we're good. I don't want to talk to them. Like, that'll lead to a very long conversation. But I felt like saying, you might want to think about the people that are picking your fruit and be a little bit more compassionate about making sure that everyone, that everyone's safe and sound. It's just really interesting to see all of the misinformation and try to fight it along the way and help companies stay compliant, and then also be someone who's giving back as much as possible. So I've tried to partner with PPE companies that are giving back, and then also tried to maintain a supply chain that's going to keep pricing down and cut out a lot of middlemen, so that people aren't paying $7 and $8 for a mask, and they're paying, $3 and $4 for a mask, if possible.
right.
And I still can't log on, you guys. I don't know what's going on. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Does anybody have any, while we're doing that, does anybody have any questions or comments? You can throw them in chat. I can read them.
What are you seeing? I'd be curious what you're saying about the pool testing. So what is your thought on that versus the individualized tests? It seems like it's pretty promising, but what are you seeing?
So what was that first word you said?
The pool
The
testing?
pool testing?
Mm-hmm.
As in testing people in a group instead of individually? Oh,
yeah.
So just so you know, we do the testing for individuals, or we do the testing. So what companies are finding is that it's a lot easier for us to come out to the company, set up a test, and do almost a wellness fair, but it's surrounding around COVID, so that they can come in and get tested at their leisure. So we're doing both. Anybody who's testing positive for COVID, in order for us to make a plan for them to come back to work and not infect others and keep everyone safe, we implement a plan for them to come back to work and then stay safe at work. And those people are tested at home. And so I have the capability of testing anyone at home nationwide, and also then following up with them as they're either going through the journey, or if they have fear, or if they're feeling anxiety or sadness over the fact that they have to quarantine. So the breadth of what we do is as individualized as one person as it is to a group of people. I mentioned the group of people just because, that's what's been really popular with us right now, is that companies just want to get back to work. And in order to do that, they need to get a baseline and assess their entire population, and then set a program forward for them to go back safely. Did that answer a question?
Yeah, that's great information. So this is Rhonda Parouty. I'm the president at EBW, and I have a question regarding what you're seeing, or what your process recommendation is for companies once they test positive? Are you testing multiple times before you allow them back in the office, or is it just manage symptoms, check in until you deem it safe once symptoms are alleviated?
No, so here's and I feel very after being in the middle of this for 4 months, I'm not a doctor, right? But I do have doctors that are on my advisory panel. And so I feel very strongly about the fact that everybody needs to know what the baseline is, because we have a lot of asymptomatic people who are COVID positive out there. And we don't know who's asymptomatic and who, and then obviously we know who's symptomatic because they're coming to the table with symptoms. But so one of the cases that I'm working on right now with a company who's trying to get their everyone back to work, it's a retail outlet, and they have a woman who was symptomatic. We tested her COVID positive. Her partner was asymptomatic. She was symptomatic. He was asymptomatic COVID positive. Doesn't have any problems. She was sick as a dog. He was not, and yet they were living together. So she probably got it from him. And our policy is we start everyone with a baseline. So everyone gets a PCR test. We see if you're asymptomatic, positive for COVID, and then we start following up on a daily basis at 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. and 7 p.m., or you can set the times that you wish to have people check in. And then you have an administrator that's able to see, okay, Sally hasn't checked in yet. I'm going to send her a text. Or we automatically send that text, and then we follow through. And then for people who are symptomatic and who actually are COVID positive, then they go into quarantine, and then we're testing them after 7 days. And then we're testing them after they no longer have symptoms for 72 hours. We're testing them, and then we're testing them again 3 days later. So we're making sure that they're completely COVID free, and we're doing both serology and PCR. IgG, IgM, and then PCR.
So a total of 4 tests?
We're doing a total of 3 tests.
3
plus
tests.
plus the serology, because you need to know where they are in that spectrum, right? Are they, especially for people who are starting to feel symptoms, that PCR test only gives you a 4-day window to see if those antibodies are in your body already fighting it, and you have to have quite a few antibodies. So the serology test is giving you, another 7 days to figure out if someone has COVID in their body. And, with all of the research that's coming out, we're not saying that it's COVID-19 because there's several different strains in this country now. We're just saying it's COVID. And so we're going to wait for 7 days, and we're going to give you another PCR test. So it's really individualized, and we try to make sure that the population stays safe. We had a meat processing plant that that had COVID positive people, and we implemented the plan. We brought them all back in after we assessed where the population was. They were working really well for 2 months, and they decided that they were COVID free, so they added a 3rd shift. And that 3rd shift, someone had COVID, and the entire factory shut down. Everyone got it. So it's really making sure that you're staying on top of those symptoms after you've tested people and you know for sure that they're not asymptomatic COVID positive, and then following through individually, because as we've all been informed, it has to do with, ethnicity, age, blood type, genetics. I mean, it's all kind of mixed in there. So we're just making sure that we're creating a plan that's holistic, that goes, and that you can use your existing assets. So if you already have a telemedicine company that you're working with, you know what, we will work with them. We take insurance, we do private pay. I mean, we're truly a concierge service, and we walk in and we assess what you're doing, and then we pull it together in a way that's sustainable, because no one budgeted for this year. It didn't, right? So we have to make sure that we're staying as present with each one of our clients and their pain points and the things that they're going through, while staying compliant at a state, federal, local, and industry, from an industry standpoint as well, because each industry has their own their own standards that they want people to adhere to.
Victoria, I'm going to interrupt you there, although we could listen to you for hours. Because this is like
Thank
the
you.
work you're doing is amazing, and the learnings that we could have about how you're working with industries and how this is working. So one thing, I'm always very conscious of our time, so we have like 1 minute left. Can you throw into the chat, and then I will share it in the email, don't worry, but if you could just put your website into the chat so people can follow up.
Yes, I will. And again, I'm so sorry I didn't get to see any of you. I don't know what's going on here.
That's okay. This is the time of like the Zoom disasters. We've all had them. I had one the other day where it was like, oh my gosh, my internet is down because my cat ate my cable. But just, Victoria, thank you for the work that you're doing. And we could all, like I said, we could all listen to you for hours. And I'm so glad that you are now part of our COVIDxNOW community. And you and I have spoken a lot, and looking forward to continued connections, because I think there's so much we can do together with you and what you're doing on COVID-19 and testing, and also with our EBW community. So, and thank you for agreeing to speak, and
happy birthday.
thank you.
Yeah, Courtney, yeah, seriously.